Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of Ruby, Franke's sister. More on that in just a second. First, let's go ahead and roll the intro. Okay, for those of you who are not aware as to what is going on in this situation, I do suggest you go and check out the other video that I did on Ruby Franke already once. That will catch you up very well to where we are now. However, as just a little brief crash course for everybody, Ruby Franke, content creator, is now facing charges for child abuse. Had a channel centered around child raising that had some questionable tactics on there. And so now there's a fair bit of backlash centered around that, as a child had escaped their custody and now was able to involve law enforcement into the situation, and things are developing. Now, Ruby Franke's sister went ahead and released a video in regards to the situation. There have been multiple videos released in regards to the situation. So today we're going to be taking a look at her video to see what we're able to see from it. If there's anything extra that we might be able to glean from the situation, perhaps the surrounding context, anything along those lines. But I think that is enough of the introduction. Let's go ahead and just dive into the video.
I'm speaking today about my sister Ruby Franke, who was arrested a few weeks ago for child abuse. By now, you probably know that. You also probably have seen my sister Bonnie's video. I was about to post a video yesterday or today and just couldn't bring myself to do it. I've been trying to gather my thoughts for several weeks, and I don't think I'm ever going to have my thoughts completely put together here.
I'm going to go ahead and pause here. So just making a couple notes about the video itself. This isn't an apology video, so there's nothing that she's trying to present as being more pure. That being said, she is wearing white, and it's a fairly white background. Oh well, though, it just kind of looks as if that might be the situation of that bedroom that she's in there. However, still making note of that. Along with that, we're seeing a couple dismissive eye rolls in regards to siblings releasing their videos, and then we're also seeing a little bit of disgust already starting to creep into the corners of her nose while talking about the situation itself. We'll see this develop as it continues through the video. It's only a 5-minute video or so, so let's just keep going on through it.
Together here, because it's involved so many people. There's so many little details. I am not going to be a news update. I will not update you on news. I will not give all of the little nitty-gritty details. I know I don't need to sit here and defend myself. I know I don't need to go into the history of what has happened. So we'll see where this goes and how much I get into. But the past few weeks have been extremely hard.
Gonna go ahead and pause here. Again, the thing that's characterizing most of her emotional display during this is the micro expressions of disgust. Again, centered around the corners of her nose there. You can see that coming in. And so there's a level of frustration, anger, and disgust in regards to making this video. Now, for those of you who are more involved in the 8 passengers drama sphere right now, perhaps there is some context that adds to that. However, what she's displaying right now is definite disgust. And we're also noticing a little bit in the lowering and drawing together of the eyebrows. And we're still seeing her consistently look off to the side there. Now, these look-offs to the side can be a number of various things, not the least of which, if it's including in an eye roll where the upward turn of the eye as it looked off to the side, that's a dismissive behavior. So that means that they feel above what they're talking about at the time, or they feel like dismissing it, or they don't hold as much weight to it, something along those lines. So we're seeing some of those come in here. It is fascinating to just be able to make note of where their emotional stance is so far, but let's just see how they handle this.
Extremely hard. Not only did all that happen with Ruby, but I had just moved to a new state, and Landon had to go back to Utah to finish up his dissertation for his degree. And so I've been settling into a new home with the kids without his help, and all of this fell down. So I literally have not had the physical or emotional capacity to address anyone, nor do I need to address anyone. But here we are. 3 years ago, Ruby, everything was great. It seemed to be fine anyway. We were a typical family. She was getting some therapy counseling because their family needed it, which I think is...
So something that I'm noticing all throughout this is the constant no shake in there. And now it's not necessarily just a micro no shake, so that could be the desynchronization point. But what we're seeing is a more macro no shake, which then could be related into the you wouldn't believe or it's unbelievable in that line of thinking, which as she's saying these things like, oh, everything, we were just a perfectly fine, happy, normal family. She's still doing this no shake no in there. And that is a little bit of just a red flag for me to be able to hone in and pay attention to try to decipher what is what is unbelievable about the situation that she's presenting? If so, even with the macro no shakes like that, you would not believe. Why wouldn't we believe that? And the reason for that is that there is evidence on the internet that perhaps everything wasn't just as normal and happy-go-lucky as she is presenting it here to be. Now, something else that she's done verbally that already kind of lets us know what the tone of this video is she's trying to garner a level of pity for herself, which, okay. And then along with that, she's also trying to make excuses for herself as well as to why she hasn't been involved in the situation, be it through all of her other life circumstances. She does bring up the good point that it's not her responsibility. However, as the sibling here that is now speaking out on it, she has now kind of inserted herself into the fray, so to speak. So now it is on some level her responsibility. Let's see how she handles it.
He did it, which I think is great. However, I think you need to get it from a great source. Read the reviews. Jodi Hildebrandt and her website or therapy style, I don't know what you want to call it, connections, was not a great resource. And we all saw it. We all felt weird about this Jodi lady. We weren't comfortable with it. We didn't like it. We didn't like the teachings Ruby was bringing.
Gonna go ahead and pause here. So now it sounds like she's trying to shift all responsibility, not so much even onto Ruby, but onto Jodi Hildebrandt, which was Ruby's business partner. For those of you who has not seen the first video, again, go check it out. But now we're hearing her try to present this narrative that, well, it was all pretty good until Jodi entered into the picture. Now, throughout that time, we're also now starting to see a number of micro no-shakes and a defensive gesture as she's talking about how Jodi Hildebrandt's whole methodology was wrong or they didn't appreciate it. And so those micro no-shakes in there could be an indicator of the negative emotion that goes along with that of like, oh, it's not a pleasant situation, so these no-shakes are creeping out there. However, it could also be that she is showing a point of desynchronization as she's saying that they felt a certain way and her head is betraying her as she's doing micro no-shakes. For those of you who don't know, the smaller the movement of the head, the less likely it is to be consciously controlled. So if you see a big, huge no-shake, obviously people can do that at the drop of a hat. But if you just see teeny tiny little itty-bitty ones, it's much more difficult for a person to consciously control those sorts of movements while trying to produce a narrative or lie. So we're seeing that kind of creep in here, that there's the possibility of that desynchronization point, and we're still seeing the constant disgust, and now we're hearing her try to hang everything onto Jodi. Let's just see how this continues to play.
Ruby was bringing to the family functions, and we were this close to telling her, if you come to our family events anymore, we do not want to hear what you were learning through connections because we don't like it. We never did say that to her, but we thought it. Anyway, so...
Okay, so this close to, and so what they've now presented is this, they were going to morally correct Ruby for saying things that were pretty heinously immoral, but they never did. After that, she does a shrug and she does a dismissal eye roll and a prolonged eye blink in there, so that could be an eye blocking gesture. So there's obviously a level of psychological discomfort centered around that, and it strikes me as a little suspicious that perhaps this level of possible intervening didn't actually exist. That maybe they were a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not complacent. It's not complacent. For those of you that thought it was complacent, it's not that. That they were just fine. That they were pretty okay with how Ruby was handling her parenting style. So that's what I'm getting so far from this. Let's keep going.
Anyway, so 3 years ago, Ruby and I hung out bottling tomatoes, and then a few weeks later, crap hit the fan and she left the family. And she didn't even call me to say, hey, you know, Julie, you're doing this and this, I don't like it, you're living your life in distortion, so I'm gonna have to take some time away from you. No, literally nothing. She did call my mom and yelled at my mom on the phone for 45.
Okay, so during this time, while she's talking about the call from Ruby, you could see a little bit of activity coming into the one side of her face, indicating possible contempt, which, for those of you that don't know, contempt stripped down is a feeling of moral or intellectual superiority on some level. So that makes sense in regards to feeling like her sister didn't give any warning, and to feel like they're above that, that makes sense. So that's in there. We're going to also see that level of disgust still creeping around in the corners of her nose there. She's recalling this entire situation, especially now that she's talking about the phone call with her mother. A little bit more of the disgust comes into there as well. Let's see how this plays.
For 45 minutes and accused her of things that were not true. It was almost as if Ruby had been making up memories from her childhood. She was trying to grab at anything she could, and she would exaggerate on everything. So she started all of her lies back then, lying to everyone in her life, getting rid of all of her friends and family. And
this part is striking me as interesting. We're hearing her pitch increase. We're seeing some manipulators come out here. We're hearing some vocal haltings and difficulties in there. And all of these are fascinating tells. It's a level of agitation that's creeping up in here. And so for me, that just leads me to feel a little bit suspicious about how the family felt in regards to Ruby's beginning of all her lies. More or less what I'm kind of gathering from this is that she's trying to build separation from Ruby to the rest of the family, but her nonverbal communication is kind of showing that that might not have been as separate as it was, aka that the rest of the family was in the know as to what was going on and just didn't do very much of anything about it. That's what I'm gathering so far. Let's keep watching.
And I literally had no contact with her. She wouldn't respond to any texts or emails over the time that I tried reaching out to her. Never got a response from her. So I was very fortunate to have been able to reach out to her daughter Sherry once she was an adult. And
during that time, I do believe that, even with the micro no shakes in there as well, as she's saying that I never was reached out, and that affirmative head shakes where they belong. Everything seemed to be pretty synchronized in that part, still looking off to the side rather regularly. Perhaps there's an item that they're fixated on. For instance, here in my studio, there's a window behind the camera, so I'll stare off until I get distracted by trees. So there could be the possibility here, but what I am noticing from the rest of that little moment there, it seemed to be pretty synchronized, so I would actually believe them, at least on that part. Let's keep watching.
I was an adult, and we were able to form a really close, strong relationship, which I am grateful for. And it was then that I learned more about Ruby, and it was then that Sherry had learned about lies that had been told to her. I feel like me and my sister...
Again, nodding throughout that, more about Ruby. There are a couple no shakes that are sprinkled in there. They don't seem to be lined up or misaligned with any verbal thing that's being processed at the time. So we're seeing fairly synchronized communication from them during this in regards to this conversation and exploration and re-understanding of the relationship to her sister that she has. Let's keep watching.
Me and my other sisters have said, we feel like we've just been kind of floating on a cloud here these past few weeks. We are in complete shock still as to what she had done, because we had no idea of what was happening.
Something negative about that floating on a cloud for the past 2 weeks. We're seeing a little bit of downward turn of the corners of the mouth there. That could be obviously into the realm of sadness or pain, regret, something along those lines. And then we're also seeing a little bit of activity in the nose for the disgust, and a bit of a shrug, perhaps insecurity or insincerity. And then also we're seeing a little bit of a no shake in there as well. So that cluster lets us know that something negative about this floating along like they're on a cloud is existent. Now, whether or not that's the negative emotion that goes along with floating on said cloud, or if it's that there's something else that's underneath this cloud statement that we're not aware of, is difficult to say at this time. However, we do know that the emotions related to that instance, that scenario, are quite negative. So let's keep watching.
Basically, I'm here to say that I had no idea what was happening. Like Bonnie mentioned in her video.
All right, gotta go ahead and pause that there. Interesting cut. There have been a number of cuts throughout this video. None of them have been substantial, and that it hasn't been just butchered to all get out. It's not like it's every other word is cut and put together into whatever kind of sentence. However, I do find that one cut pretty substantial and pretty interestingly placed. So I had no idea. Hard cut, you could see that there's been some repositioning in there, and then she comes back into talking. So I find that fascinating that at this hot point of I had no idea that anything was going on, that is where such a hard cut exists. It raises questions for me, a little bit of a red flag. However, there's not enough around it in context to be able to be like, definitely something's going, like they did something wrong there. However, it is suspicious on some level that did end up there. What happened in that cut? Why was there the need for that cut right afterwards? What was the repositioning in regards to? For those of you that don't know, as roles change in a conversation or as subjects change, whenever there's a change and alteration in the dynamic of a conversation or a monologue, you can usually see a repositioning happen of some sort. But we see that they're masked by a cut, so I'm curious. Regardless, there's not too many answers that I can find around it, so let's just keep watching.
Her video. We are not going to let Ruby destroy another thing in our lives. We have our platforms where we try and bring brightness and positivity into other people's lives, and that is why we didn't talk about Ruby in our content for the past 3 years. Yeah, we try and show the highs and lows.
Also interesting, throughout all of that, as they're talking about, we're just trying to bring happiness and blah, blah, blah to our lives. They are still doing a fairly what I would consider micro no shake. No, could be controlled. It is large enough to be controlled, and technically you can control just about everything that your body does. However, with this being lined up in this area, it is fascinating that they're having vocal difficulty with it as well. Some stops and stutters and whatnot in there. So for me, that feels like perhaps there's a little bit more weight behind that. There's something that they're not revealing there, but we're going to go ahead and keep watching.
And show the highs and lows of everyday family and parenting, but Ruby's topic was not supposed to be part of that content, and it was none of your business. It was nothing that
and there we go. So now we're seeing that we're just trying to spread positivity. Yeah, we're actually just doing basically the same thing that Ruby was, but like we're doing it differently, right? So they're still trying to draw this separation when in reality their content was extremely similar and they're in the same family group, and people are suspicious like, okay, so if you do similar content, you are related to this person and you knew about some of these difficulties, why didn't you do anything? And so their response to this is like, well, I was overwhelmed and I didn't do anything about, I didn't know. It was more or less the call out on that. However, I'm not so certain as to whether or not that's genuinely reliable or not, but let's just keep watching.
it was nothing that we needed to talk about, and I wasn't sure if her kids were maybe still watching these videos, and I didn't want to be not tactful and slander their mom and then have them watch those videos. That didn't sound like a nice thing to do either, and so that is another reason why we didn't talk about the subject.
I mean, that's also assuming that their mom was going to let them have their phones for any good reason at all. I mean, to be fair to the actual situation there, that is a genuine fair point to not want to stir up drama within another family by posting videos on your own. It would be a weird passive-aggressive kind of move to do without trying to handle it within the family hub itself first. So that I can get behind. But again, it's sounding like so far the rest of the family was just complacent. They just didn't want to do much about it, or they're going to claim, and they have been claiming, that they didn't know to do much about it. But that in and of itself seems suspicious to me, considering the content styles and considering the familial relations to begin with. Let's keep watching.
About the subject of Ruby for the past few years on my channel. However, as far as my platforms go, I do want to continue them, but the content will probably look a little bit different. I have some pre-recorded videos before all of this fell apart that I will be posting, and then after those videos I will probably just shift my content a little bit and it'll be a little different, but I will still be here posting probably once a week instead of twice a week like I had been. And I hope you guys stick around. Those followers who have been following...
Gonna go ahead and pause there. Has a little bit of contempt when she's talking about her upload schedule from twice a week to once a week. Not sure what that contempt is creeping in there for. However, it is existing in there. And we're hearing that she's going to shift her content, which must mean that on some level it's at least directing the same sort of attention that Ruby's content was. So I find that fascinating as well. Let's keep watching.
Following me for years, saw past all of this. You were here to support and love no matter what. The people who came here to my comment section with negativity and attack were probably people that didn't even know who we were. And so I know not to take offense to all of that, even though it was still really hard to see and hear all of the negativity. So if you have been a long-time viewer and you have stuck around, thank you so much for your love and support. And if you are new to my channel, welcome.
Ooh, okay, so that's how that wraps up there. And at the very end, it's harping heavily on only adding value to the people that have been in the subscriber base for a while. Anybody who's exterior doesn't know enough to be able to say anything about it, which, I mean, that's their prerogative to say. But then at the very end, thank you for all of you that have been around for a long time. Then they do a substantial eye block with a little bit of an eye roll in there. So that's dismissal. That's an eye blocking gesture. So separation from. And then if you're new here, does a substantial lip compression. And now we're seeing a tight-lipped smile. She says, welcome, with a little bit of a no-shake in there. That doesn't really actually convey welcoming energy in nonverbal communication terms. While she's trying to say it verbally, we're seeing that desynchronization point. And in those instances, again, it's always safest to rely on what people are saying with their bodies rather than their words, because a lot of the times people know how to lie with their words and not so well with their bodies. So she's not super excited about new people coming in, especially in this time of turbulence, as shown by your nonverbal communication. So, from what I was able to gather, at least from this short little clip here, is that perhaps the family was a little bit more in the know as to what was going on with Ruby's situation, but they just remained quiet about it. They did not get involved with it, and now that it's rather come out and it's a little bit more public. Now they're like, well, yeah, we have to separate ourselves from this person because we don't want to be dragged down with what's happening to Ruby. So that's what I'm seeing here. It's a little bit of just saving face. I am suspicious of their claims that none of the family really knew what was going on. And then even outside of that, there were posts and such from the rest of the family talking about like, it's good that this has happened. We support this. We're not going to talk about it anymore, things like that. So they did obviously know on some level what was going on, but they're also trying to say that they did. It's just muddy, it's messy, and it feels a lot like it's just a family trying to separate from a problematic corner of things, even though there may have been some involvement in it from themselves, or at least they were okay with it going on, or they didn't do anything to stop it. So that's what I was able to pick up from this. If you have any other questions or suggestions, especially in regards to this case, let me know in the comments below. If there are any links to any other videos, something along those lines, I am always interested to be able to continue down these. I've got some other videos coming up in the future that I'm pretty excited about. If you have any requests for any specific ones, just let me know in the comments below. I'm also on the social medias a fair bit, so reach out to any of those, and that's always welcome. You can also now become a full-on member of the channel if you would like to. You could just hit join down there. There's only one tier. You get a level of custom badges and some extra interaction and some exclusive posts and engagement, things like that. It's pretty cool, but it's mainly just centered around if you would like to be able to support Observe a little bit more. Then that's the easiest way to do it. Also, there's still Patreon. That's where I'll release any of the videos that have been copyright claimed by YouTube to be able to have it fully visible and viewable for you, so you can go and check that out as well. But without further ado, that's all that I've got for today. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome as you always are, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.